Welcome to the 181st episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist, primary care physician, and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome. I had a lot of good feedback from the podcast with Dr. Pam Popper. I think everybody was excited to find ways to help their kids eat better and improve better in school. So thank you for all the nice, positive feedback on that show. It was a pleasure speaking with her. I hope to have her on the show again and perhaps join me in a conference in the near future. So I am less than a week out from my Ironman Chattanooga. It's this Sunday. So I thought I would dedicate this podcast to the effects of endurance running, and I guess you could throw Ironman in there since there's a 26-mile run at the end of a 114-mile bike ride and a 2.4-mile swim. Actually, Chattanooga is 116 miles because they have to they had to alter the course a little bit to be able to make it circle around right. So we have a little extra. It's actually a 144.2-mile day, I believe, is what the end result is. But, you know, what's 4 miles among friends? So there's rumors and tweets out there by various cardiologists that say that endurance activity is actually bad for you, and that we should refrain, and especially as we get older, be more cautious and not do endurance training and just do, you know, the bare minimum that's needed to get that bare minimum American Heart Association exercise. Well, it's just that. It's a American Heart Association exercise that somebody came up with that they thought people would maybe comply with. We know that exercising 30 minutes is better than 20 minutes, an hour is better than 30 minutes, an hour and a half is better than an hour or so, but nobody ever looked at the other. There's talk of, it's just somewhat controversial, that athletes are more prone to atrial fibrillation. And certainly atrial fibrillation happens in athletes. It happens a little bit more in athletes that were collegiate athletes as they become older. But none of this, they're all observational studies, and none of the studies took into account dietary factors or cholesterol levels or blood factor levels or other lifestyle factors. So just pointing at the endurance activity itself is a little bit far-fetched, I believe. So I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about marathoning, and specifically marathoning. Again, you know, you can put it to any endurance athletic event that you'd like. There are 581,811 people that run a marathon each year. There are 570 United States marathons each year. And about half of a percentage of the United States population has run a marathon. About 181 people do a marathon annually. So the majority of people run a marathon and they don't do another marathon. But there are some of us that make it our sport or our hobby of choice and run multiple ones every year. There has been a decrease in running since 2011, about 45% decrease. You know, it's attributable to, there was a big, you know, we have running booms and then they come and they go. And the hardcore runners continue on. There was a specific series, I believe it's still going on to some degree, rock and roll, where there was people traveling, you know, to do and collect medals from various locations. And I think that really spurred the marathon popularity. You know, a lot of fundraisers associated with, you know, team and training for leukemia and lymphoma, and different, there's all sort of colitis foundation, there's a Parkinson's foundation, diabetes foundation, have all did destination marathons, you know, and those kind of come and go, and so that kind of contributes to how many people actually run a marathon every year. Most people run about 40 miles a week when they're training for a marathon. You can't, you know, it's like a final exam, you can't really cram for it. So, but there are people that do that. Typically, young people will try to say that they're in pretty good shape doing other things, and so they'll go out and run a marathon. And you see them at about, around mile 20, 22, 23. They're walking, holding their hamstring. Because it's just it's something that you have to work up to. So typically the marathon training involves a long run on the weekends that starts out, maybe 8 or 10 miles and progresses every week up to a 18 or 20 mile run before the race. Typically the weekly marathon mileage goes up about 10% a week over about a 16-week period, depending on one's level of fitness. So that you gradually increase your body's ability to, one, time on your feet, getting your tendons and little muscles of your feet and ankles ready for the prolonged pounding. Obviously, cardiac conditioning, conditioning your stomach. So there's a lot that goes into training for a marathon. The average male takes him about 4 hours and 22 minutes, and the average female about 4 hours and 47 minutes. It's kind of funny. I've been putting my marathon medals and shirts, framing them, and putting them in the office for a lot of years. And one time I did the Rome Marathon, and one of my patients asked me if I was in the Olympics. And I said, no, I wasn't in the Olympics. It was just the Rome Marathon. She says, oh, that's nice. And she said, did you win? And I said, no, I didn't win. And she said, well, what place did you get? And I said, I don't know, 12,000, 10,000, someplace in the mid-pack. And she said, well, maybe you should have practiced. So people always, come up with, they'll say, did you run a marathon? And I'll say, yes. And they'll say, what did you do? And I'll say, 4 hours and 20, 4 hours and 30 minutes. That's around where I finish a lot of times. And they say they're disappointed, and they say, well, doesn't the winner, run in about 2 hours and change? It's actually, there was just a world record set at 2 hours and 1 minute. But most of the time, the winners are around 2 hours and 10 to 15 minutes. And it's like, yes, but they happen to be professional athletes, at 25 to 35 years of age. But everybody is graded around that, kind of like if it's golf, because there are golfers that can be amateurs and shoot a 75 or almost par, but running's a whole different story as far as an endurance sport. So not too many people get to the professional 2 hours and change levels that aren't professionals. But anyway, people are disappointed if you're not. The median age of runners is 40 for men and 37 for women. And actually, people over 40 make up the majority of people running marathons. 50% of the finishers are over 40 years of age. So, it's not typically a sport of young people. They're doing other things, having families. It's kind of people wake up and decide that they want to become athletic again. They want to get back in shape, so they take up running. Marathoning is not an all-out sprint. That's why they say it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's a lower heart rate, longer training. So people need a dedicated amount of time to run a marathon. There's a group called the Marathon Maniacs, which I'm a member of, that you can become a member of if you run 2 marathons in 16 days or 3 marathons in 90 days. That's how I got in. Goes all the way up to 4 marathons in 37 days. There are people that run a marathon every week. There's actually an older gentleman that's in his 60s that runs a marathon just about every weekend as a hobby, and he's still, hanging in there. I don't think he has atrial fibrillation. But that doesn't mean that, that's a great thing to do. There is 0.6 to 0.9 deaths in running a marathon in 100,000 people. So that's pretty low, a lot less than a lot of other sports, or certainly driving a car. And the deaths seem to occur in younger people. There was a death in a 42-year-old last year, a 35-year-old. A lot of times these people, whether there was associated supplement use, or there's also people don't know that they have structural heart disease, such as hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or significant valvular heart disease. Men are 5 times more likely to die in a marathon than women. 75% of the people have a heart murmur. So, if you're going to take up marathon running in, your anytime, really, you should have a physical, or somebody should listen to your heart to make sure everything sounds good. If you have high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol, and you're on 6 medications, then it is probably not the right thing, or not the right place to start. But again, we believe that if you eat the right way, we can reverse all those things, and you too can run a marathon. So, I mean, those are the kind of the basics of running a marathon. I'd like to talk a little bit about the benefits because, people think that you're just beating yourself up for 26.2 miles and, struggling along the way. I guess the first aspect, that I like to talk about is the mental aspect. Running is associated, especially endurance running, is associated with decrease in depression, improved memory and learning, and mental toughness, because during 4 hours, sometimes longer, a lot of things happen. People, nutrition may not go the right way. Your stomach may act up. It may rain. It may snow. You get cold. You get hot. You may twist your ankle. There's a variety of different things that happen that you need to react to. Sometimes you just feel bad for a while, and then it gets better. It's a way of getting mentally tough that, allows you to say, here's a problem. How should I handle it? What do I do to make it through? I always told my family that I may not finish as fast as I want, but I'll always finish, because I believe that, especially when my daughter was young, that it was important to prove, or at least that, you're going to finish something that you start out with, no matter how things go. It may not be your day, but you still finish, and you accept accomplishments that you get. I did have one marathon where I had a lot of GI problems. Was in the woods multiple times during the race. It was before I was plant-based. And I became dehydrated and a little dizzy. And I wasn't sure about the ability to kind of get going. But, I kept troubleshooting. And finally, when I stopped taking fluids in, everything kind of settled down, and I was okay. And actually, by the time I finished, it wasn't, all that bad. I didn't have the time that I wanted, but I finished nevertheless. I've had injuries during a marathon that weren't severe, but they were enough that they caused me to have to, walk more than I ran. And so I finished a lot slower. I've had stupid things that I've done as far as nutrition or going out too fast that have caused me to not, finish when I thought I was going to finish. And that's the beauty of marathoning, is that there's so many things can happen during the period that you're running that you have to adjust to, and things don't go your way, and often don't go your way, as in, think life. And so you have to learn to adjust, and, you can either come away being very disappointed, or you can look at it as, that was great for this day and the accomplishments that you attained. One time, a patient asked me, and it's like, I just have to ask you, if you're going to lose every time you toe the line at a marathon, why do you do it? And, it comes down to the point where I'm not losing when I look at myself. I'm completing a task that I've trained 16 weeks for. And so I'm crossing the finish line and accomplishing that goal of crossing the finish line of 26.2 mile race. There is an age group that you're judged on. So where you place in your age group, if you got better there, then that's an accomplishment that you can look at. Just beating your own time is an accomplishment that I look at. And then just the mere fact of, again, troubleshooting successfully is something that, I think is a great thing to look on. And that, yes, you were able to see troubles and get your way through it. And, and the bottom line, it's a hobby. And it's a great day outside, soaking up fresh air, being with people, smiling. It's an extremely positive atmosphere. People are cheering for people that they don't even know, that aren't professional athletes, just for the sheer joy of doing a sport with somebody else. So it's a great experience. If you look at, people say always, your knees are going to go, or don't your knees hurt? And interestingly, just at the conference for International Plant-Based Nutrition Conference, there was an orthopedic surgeon who gave a talk, and really osteoarthritis is a disease of inflammation and actually inactivity. It's not a disease of overactivity. And so running is actually protective for your knees. Your muscles stay strong, your knee joints stay stay taut, your ligaments and tendons stay taut, and you're less likely to have osteoarthritis, especially if you combine it with plant-based nutrition. Osteoarthritis people tend to not, have a diffuse inflammation in their bones, and bone marrow reflect it, just like any other inflammation in the body. There's a decrease of all-cause mortality overall with endurance athletics, decreased incidence of diabetes, mainly because people are more likely to maintain a healthy weight. Not always. There are the people that run to eat. Those would, I put those in the more unhealthy population. If you're eating poorly before and after marathon, you're increasing your risk, and you're certainly not going to lose weight or decrease your risk probably overall of coronary artery disease much more than sedentary people. But you still do. There's still a decreased risk in osteoarthritis, still a decreased risk of diabetes. Actually, there's an improvement in ejection fraction in people that have a decreased heart function, with actually increased cardiac stem cell by about 1% production by about 1% a year. Leg muscles are obviously increased, and we've known by data that I've presented before that the stronger your legs are, the better your brain is, because your leg strength, as Team Scherzai discussed, is a direct correlate of your abilities, your brain's ability to uptake glucose and to get glucose and oxygen and nutrients pumped to your brain. So anything you can do to strengthen your leg, including endurance running, is going to help. Your bone mass and tendon strength increases. Nothing better than pounding the pavement to be a weight-bearing exercise. So pounding the pavement increases your bone strength, bone mass. There are stress fractures in runners, typically in the lower small bones of the tibia or the feet, and it usually occurs in people that, again, have increased their mileage too much or eating poorly and have inflammation. So again, take everything with a grain of salt, but for the most part, your muscle mass is going to increase, your tendons are going to increase. Capillary flow and mitochondria to the muscles, in the muscles themselves, are also going to improve. When you exercise, you increase the mitochondria, which are the energy warehouses or the energy producers, powerhouses of our body. And so it increases our ability to uptake, our muscles to uptake oxygen and produce nutrients, utilize glucose. And so that's all good for the rest of your body. The more mitochondria you have, the more oxygen you're sending to your tissues, the better you do. Your VO2 max, or your ability to extract oxygen, goes up. And we know from recent studies that if your VO2 max is greater than 50, it adds years onto your life. If it's less than 30, years are taken off of your life. If your ability to walk on a treadmill in a brisk protocol is greater than 12, or 10 minutes, which is a usual thing for marathon runners, then it shows it's correlated with an improved long-term outcome. So again, training is very, very beneficial. You increase your muscle myoglobin, which is, again, ability to uptake oxygen, red blood cells, utilize oxygen. So all that actually improves with running. We know that the sugar metabolism in your brain is better when you're running. Depression is lower in runners. There are a lot of people that have overcome, sometimes ultra runners are accused of being addicted to running or trading one addiction from another. But an addiction that tears down your body as opposed to one that builds your body up, I think that's probably a pretty good trade-off. There have been studies in people that just had a heart attack and looking at whether they were endurance athletes or not, or actually just beginning to train. And after a heart attack, it's why we do cardiac rehab, so you can increase your cardiac output. You actually change the way your heart remodels after a heart attack. So exercise is very beneficial to keep your heart from dilating excessively. So you can actually improve your cardiac function after a heart attack if you exercise. Now, am I going to say right now, if you just had a heart attack, you should run a marathon? No, but I think walking, running is the way to go. And again, eating a whole food, plant-based diet, increasing the oxygen delivered to your arteries, you too can run a marathon. There's a lot of hormonal changes with vasoconstriction, your abilities, your blood vessels to dilate, your fluid retention that improves with exercise. So there's so many good things as opposed to bad things. That we pick out one little thing such as atrial fibrillation that may or may not. I think it's really premature to say don't run a marathon. I would say to my patients or anybody that I deal with, let's see how we can make you the most fit individual to run a marathon, because I truly do believe that endurance sports are great activities. Our forefathers, ran and walked all day long. The sitting in a chair in a cubicle all day long is pretty new stuff. So we were meant to be up. We were meant to be moving the majority of the day, not sitting the majority of the day and just doing a little exercise at a box gym with a bunch of old microbes in it. So, there's so much more that when you get outside and run as far as clearing your head. And there's a group, that even talk about, running as a form of meditation, because when you're kind of running long enough, your mind kind of settles down and everything kind of comes into perspective. So for me, it's a great way to clear my head every day. A lot of people have different exercises, whether it's cycling to clear their head or swimming to clear their head. Whatever it is that you come up with is great, but you have to do it long enough to settle down. It's like if you were going on vacation and, you really have a stressful job, or your life is stressed, and all of a sudden you get to go on vacation. You just can't kind of turn the switch off and be on vacation. It takes a couple days to kind of get there and settle down, and then you start to relax and unwind, that you go into a different level of yourself, and a calmness starts to come over you perhaps. And that's the same way with endurance athletics, in exercise. You just don't go out in 30 minutes you achieve, people say, I've never achieved the runner's high. Well, you have to be out there a little longer, and it's not necessarily a runner's high, it's a runner's calm that you get out, that, you're out there for long enough that your mind starts to quiet down, and you just become at peace with being outside. And that takes a while. That's not something that happens in a 15 or 20 minute run on a treadmill. So again, I would encourage you to go outside and try running. First, maybe walking. There's a guy named Jeff Galloway that's patented, for the most part, a run-walk method of completing a marathon and going out and running. And it starts with just a little bit of running intermixed with walking, and you gradually, get to a certain level where you're walking at a certain interval, whether it's 3 minutes. And actually, for the marathon, for the Ironman, I run for 3 minutes and walk 30 seconds. And it allows you, when you're walking at a good clip, you're not slowing down, but you're walking fast. It allows you to stretch out your legs a little bit because it's a different movement. Allows your heart rate to come down, allows your body temperature to come down a little bit, so that you kind of don't override any of your systems. So depending on your ability, age, your level of training, you can set different walk-run time periods that you can be out for a long time, and actually, enjoy it. Oftentimes people go out way too fast and they can't talk and they can't breathe, and then they can't go any further, and they stop and they say, this is miserable. But it's one of being very patient. And again, it's another thing that, I take away with marathoning, that it's a development of patience. You have to be patient with your body and your tendons and your muscles to let them come up and be strong, and gradually get into it, as opposed to forcing it right away. There's a pretty neat test that you can do that kind of let you set your heart rate. Some people run to a heart rate. Some people run to feel, some people run to a heart rate. You want to keep your heart rate under what we call lactic threshold, because after that, you're not going to go as long. It's where people hit the wall. So you want to keep your heart rate low enough that you're not getting up there so you can sustain your efforts for long periods of time. And one way to do that is there's a simple test called a Pledge of Allegiance test, where you can say the Pledge of Allegiance and then you start to run. And as you go longer, you notice when you can't say the Pledge of Allegiance in the same way that you did it when you were just beginning. So if you start to, I pledge allegiance to the flag, you know that you're getting up to that lactate threshold. So you look at your heart rate at that point, and then that's about 85%. And you really want to train more at 70%, and probably run your marathon someplace to 75 to 80%, depending on your level of fitness. So those are kind of poor man's methods to figure out where your heart rate should be. A lot of times people say, well, my heart rate is really high, and it's a matter of you're not being trained because you try to run too fast too much of the time. I've had Matt Fitzgerald on this podcast, and he writes a great book, 80-20 Marathoning, where he talks about the Kenyans, that they train most of their time very, very easy. It's only 20% of the time are they really pushing it. But, us weekend warriors tend to push it more. We tend to be in this gray zone, not too fast, not too slow, but we never really improve that much with our cardiac function. So how you go about training it, I find also very interesting. And again, it's strategies to try to make yourself better. I think anything you can do that, you're concentrating on, how do I perform better? How do I move better? How do I make my body move the best that it can is always, a good thing. There's also, we talk about remodeling of the heart. That's, some people say, well, there's evidence that the heart muscle enlarges in runners and becomes thickened and may dilate. But if you look at the type of muscle fiber that's occurring with this dilatation, it's actually more of a protective muscle that's developing. And just like any muscle, if there's little injuries, there can be little troponin bumps after a run because your heart rate is up for a period of time. Just like any muscle, it's going to adapt and improve over time, and especially with the stimulation of stem cell production, that over time the marathoning is actually probably a really, really good thing. They've measured antioxidant production in post endurance training, and that goes up. So even though you're generating some inflammation, you're also generating hormones and to actually clear the inflammation of your body. And then as you increase the blood flow, you're also clearing inflammation quicker. And if you throw that on, again, one more time, plant-based nutrition onto that, you're also going to have more antioxidant intake, more free, and to get rid of the inflammation that you're generating. So, again, I guess you've probably heard by now, as I've been preaching here the last 20 or so minutes, that I think that running and doing endurance races, endurance activities is better for you than not. Would I encourage everyone to do a marathon? No. Again, I think people need to be properly trained and treated accordingly. I think the worst thing that happens is after a run, I think the worst thing that happens if people, they eat to run or run to eat. And so they go for a training run and then they see how much bad food that they can eat because they feel like they can. I think that happens more in younger people than in older people, but there's still a lot of people that abuse their bodies after they run with the nutrition that they put in it and think that everything's going to be okay, but they're still generating a tremendous amount of inflammation in their body that's going to hurt them in the long run. And so the first thing we point at is the running itself, when it was really their nutrition and their other lifestyle factors. The end result is I think that, we were meant to run. We were meant to do endurance activities that were moving all day long. as opposed to sitting in a chair, but we also need to do it responsibly. A proper training program. I think, when you just turn 40 and you wake up and you're going to do a marathon, I think you should work your way up, do the shorter races first and develop, your small muscles, tendons, ligaments, develop your heart, and then run your marathon. We're oftentimes not, very patient about it. And for the most part, enjoy the experiments. But I don't think it should be an eating fest. I don't think people should run just so they can eat more calories. But as a way to incorporate your overall general health and wellness. That said, again, I have my Ironman this weekend. Getting things ready, settled on. I'm taking my homemade energy bars that are a combination of walnuts and dark cherries and some cacao powder, a little matcha tea, and dates and raisins. So that'll be what I'll use on the bike, and then water. It's really important to stay hydrated, so I'm going to do that. One thing I'm going to do this year that I haven't done in my past Ironmans, I'm actually going to get off the bike and stretch periodically. You don't drive in a car for 6 hours without getting off, out and moving around. So I'm going to get off the bike periodically and take my nutrition in, stretch out a little bit. I think that'll help me on the run. My run nutrition will probably be a concentrate of either electrolyte solution or some gels. Sometimes it comes down to orange slices. That seems to work for me, and a banana, occasional pretzel out there, occasional gel, but it's typically pretty difficult for me to tolerate the gels. The plan is to swim, bike, and run within my own ability to keep safe. I know about the pace that I need to swim. I know about the pace of the bike that I need to be able to hold on to, that I can sustain. And then, hopefully there's something left for the run. There'll be good times and bad. You feel there's lows. I guess if I'm nervous about anything, you're nervous about the lows or when things are hurting. But after a while, it tends to turn around. And again, it's an opportunity to troubleshoot and see what comes and make the best of it. It's a day that I get to be outside all day long, and swim, bike, and run. It's a beautiful morning when we start in Chattanooga. Typically, we line up in this park in the dark in single file. So you make a lot of new friends in the dark when you're sitting there waiting for the start. And when the cannon goes off, people jump in one by one. And there's this massive swim down the Tennessee River. And you swim under, I think about 3, could be 4 overpass bridges. And, you see some boats along the way. Don't take much time, but I've seen the pictures of the swim. It looks pretty cool. You get out of the water to a bunch of cheering people that are all excited to see people finish, and get on the bike, and you go out into Georgia. Eventually out through country roads, you wind around and into a couple little towns. And it's a really pretty ride. It's just starting to be fall in Tennessee, so it's nice to see that from down here in Florida where the humidity is high and the leaves never turn. So you start to see a little bit of fall colors as we ride through Tennessee and into Georgia and back around. And we do 2 loops of that a bike course out there, and then we come back into town, and you see people again, and they're screaming and hollering, and you do 2 loops around. Kind of cross over the river a couple times. So there's a fair amount of people over, and especially there's a more artsy district where people are out and cheering, and then come down that red carpet to finish. And it'll be in the dark for me, but hopefully it won't be too dark for too long, but it will be dark. And, a great day and a good time. Hope to take good memories away from it. And again, it's just a fun day to play outside and, be a human and experience your limitations. It's a great day to practice being in the moment and just being happy that you are where you are at the time that you are, and accept the good things and meet some friends along the way. So I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to jump in the water once again. Our practice is certainly focused on plant-based nutrition and helping people adopt a plant-based lifestyle and get off their medication, but it's also about movement and wellness. And so we're always excited when we get the opportunity to participate in somebody's goal setting. We'd like to see everybody have a goal that they want to set, or a race that they want to do, or an adventure they want to undertake. And we'd like to help people with it. So if you are out there and you're thinking about doing a race or getting started into endurance running or activities, and you are plant-based, or you think that this might be a way to go, we'd certainly like to help you achieve your goal. I think that we have most ends covered with to help people get their adventure going. So check out our website at drdulaney.com. It's DOCTORDULANEY. Email me at Jami at drdulaney.com. We also have Addie, my registered dietitian, who was a collegiate rower, and she's also an endurance athlete. We have a strength coach, her husband, that's a strength and conditioning coach at Georgia State, to also give us advice on strength and conditioning. We're all plant-based, all plant strong, all doing well. So we'd like to share our experiences and help you with your experience if you so desire. So check out our website. I also do a weekly blog, write on something, so you can check that out on the website. Sign up if you want to get the blog on a weekly basis. And we certainly love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments. I hope that it's going well with all those people that are trying to transition their children into eating more plants. I think the idea of taking a pea-sized bite of the vegetable that they choose to learn to like every day, and being rewarded with a sticker with the plan that you get to do something special when you've completed the sticker book. It's not probably a bad idea for that you can do as an adult as well, that you set goals. I think setting reasonable goals that are achievable at the end of a month, whether it be weight loss or adding a new vegetable or adding a plant-based meal, I think that's a great way to start to change your diet. I was asked, today, do I meet people where they are, or is it, do you have to be plant-based to join us? And of course not. None of us, or most of us, weren't plant-based from birth. There are some now, but, we had to learn to do it, and we had our ups and downs. And so it's our passion is to be able to share, our troubles, so that you don't have to repeat some of the mistakes or have some of the struggles. And we want to make things taste good, look good. If I had any gripe from the nutrition conference that I was just at, the food was very unimaginative. If people were considering a plant-based diet and ate that food, I don't think it would convince them to go plant-based. It was pretty plain. And nothing, which other than just plain vegetables without any seasoning or spices. It doesn't have to be that way. It should be pretty to look at. It should be delicious to taste. So, if you have any questions along those lines, we'd love to help you. In class today, we made spring rolls. A lot of people hadn't had spring rolls before with the rice paper, and we used different kind of cabbages, peppers, spinach, cucumber, carrots. So it made a really pretty spring roll. It's a great hors d'oeuvre, great thing to take with you on a potluck, or to have as an appetizer. So we do those kind of things in class so that it's fun. We've actually made a sauce with dehydrated peanut butter and some sriracha and a little bit of soy sauce and rice vinegar. So took some of the fat out of it. Took some of the salt out with light soy sauce, so we made a dipping sauce that was actually pretty healthy. So doesn't have to be bland food. It should be, again, look pretty to look at, great to smell, and wonderful to taste. And I hope you think about increasing your outside activity and your training to increase your endurance, increase your heart function, increase your mitochondria in your muscles. And I'll be anxious to tell you how my race went. So I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening as always.